The best leaders that I've seen, they're in the business. They are understanding that business up and down. They're communicating with their team. They're not off running around and traveling and saying, hey, I'm the visionary. I can go do whatever I want. No, you delegate and hold people accountable, but you have to understand that business up and down and lead by example and understand not only the strategy, but what's happening in the ecosystem, because the team is looking to you to be the one that can kind of see around corners through the network and the people that you're associating with. Companies need their CEO. They need to know they're there, and they need to know that they are in control.
They call that leading from the front, right?
Yep. It's different than micromanaging. Being hands-on is different than micromanaging. Hands-on is understanding the business and coaching. It's not micromanaging. It's the opposite. So who knew that talking about management would be so fun, Mallory?
I know, right? Well, it's because we're talking about it in the right ways, right?
Yeah.
The ways that lift people up.
This episode of Inside the Process is powered by Trainual, the one app that organizes who does what and how. Check it out at trainual.com.
Well, what is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Inside the Process, where we sit down with some of the raddest people in business to dig into their process best practices and how they think and operate to help you continuously improve and level up the work you're doing. I'm Mallory, a 10-year systems and ops veteran turned marketer, and I'm here with Michael Caito, CEO of MAP Consulting. Folks know him as the metrics guy who turned 6K into a $40 million business. He's a globe-trotting entrepreneur and former EO global chairman. He's incredibly passionate about growth and building up great leaders, but more importantly, making it all happen while being a super cool dad. So I'm just stoked to have you here. Welcome to Inside the Process.
Thank you. Great to be here, Mallory. I think you need to give that intro to my kids. Because I don't know if my 3 teenage boys think I'm super cool.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've got 2 boys too. I'm a boy mom, and I am new to being the parent of a teenager. I've got a 13-year-old, and he just went from thinking I was the coolest person on earth to thinking I was the lamest person on earth overnight. I swear it happened overnight.
It gets better. Don't worry.
Well, praise be.
Yes.
So I met you backstage at Playbook, and you have such an infectious energy and passion for what you do, which is why I'm just so incredibly excited to talk to you. But your passion is really around building high performance teams around rock solid systems. And it's just something that you're crazy hyped about. And I asked you what you wanted to chat about. Yeah. And in a split second, literal seconds, I saw it flash before your eyes. You said, okay, the 6 functions. I want to talk about the 6 functions. Yeah. So tell us what the 6 functions are and why folks need to pay really close attention today.
You bet. So let me just take you back to the beginning a little bit on that last business that you talked about, because I did have 2 business partners. So I didn't do it on my own. And I'm definitely a fan of having the right partners in business. When we were in college, I did something really funny when I was I was in my year 7 of my 4-year degree. And I wrote down, hey, find an idea for a business. And a couple months later, my brother and his best friend came to me with this crazy idea about delivering food from restaurants that don't really deliver, but opening them up for delivery and delivering to homes and businesses. And I'm like, I don't know how we're going to do this, but let's do it anyway. So just think Uber Eats, DoorDash. This was pre-internet and pre-mobile phones. So make a long story short, we're growing the business. And along the way, I'm realizing while we have a great culture, because we came from the hospitality industry, and, we really cared for our customers, we really cared for our people, focused on developing them, we just didn't have the other side of it, which was more of the process around how to run a business. In fact, you could say that I didn't have the process of how to be a CEO. I was an entrepreneur, but not a CEO. And there's a big difference. And I said to myself, I go, I really want to become an entrepreneurial CEO. That means combining the creativity of the entrepreneur with the rigor and the discipline of the CEO. And the reason I knew this is because our investor had told me so. And I had a choice to make. What was I going to do about that? So I went and consulted with some other CEO friends, and they pointed me at this company called MAP. And I went to this workshop that MAP offers for 2.5 days that they still do. 2 classes every single month. And it was a deep dive on me as a leader with another group of peers. And I started to understand what it meant to be a leader, what it meant to be a manager. And for me, My lens was what it meant to be a CEO. So for the next 15 years, we brought a coach in our business that helped us, coached us and my executive team on running our business, trained our managers, and helped us put the process in. So that's where it came from. And over that 15 years, we bought 10 companies, integrated them, and then eventually sold the whole thing to Grubhub about 10 years ago in 2015 when they had started to compete with DoorDash. So Grubhub was public. DoorDash was coming in with venture capital. It was a war, and they bought us to try to help them. So they took all 500 of our people. So that's where it all began. And so after we sold the business and my wife told me to get out of the house, I bought MAP, put a deal together because I'm so passionate about what they did for us that I want to help do that for more entrepreneurs and more people around the world. So that's the backstory.
Such a cool story. And I love that you had the distinction between CEO and entrepreneur, because nothing makes me laugh more than when I see somebody who starts a business, right? And they're a solopreneur, they have one person, and they change their LinkedIn headline to like CEO of whatever their company is, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, there's clearly a distinction between being the CEO of a legitimate company and being a solopreneur with sort of your side hustle that hasn't earned the street cred of being an actual organization yet, right?
Yeah.
And so talk to us about that difference.
Well, listen, I think we've all heard the saying, what got you here won't get you there type of thing. And
I've got the book.
Yeah, see, you've got it. See, and theoretically, can all say we're all the CEOs of our own life. But like when you're an entrepreneur, you're going into this thing, and I hate to use the word risk. It's not really that sometimes you're just risking it all, but you're managing risk. And the entrepreneur life is you've got an idea, and you're like, you just know that the benefit of going all in and starting a business far outweighs the regret of never trying to do it. And even if you fail, that's the thing. It's a gene. And I sometimes think about this, Mallory. I'm like, can you build an entrepreneur? Are they born? Are they created? How does it work? I don't know. All I know is that there's a certain gene that a lot of entrepreneurs have, which is they know that they have to go create something. And so that's what an entrepreneur is like. The CEO, to transform into a CEO, you've got to think about as your business is building, you're hiring people. Like in the beginning, people want to work for an entrepreneur. They want to work for the startup. They're like, yeah, we're young, we're gritty, we're getting out of college. We want to be around something cool. But as your company starts to grow, you start having to elevate everything in the business to people. So you've got to upgrade talent. You've got process. Entrepreneurs aren't great at that because we're so like, let's move, fire, ready, aim, so to speak. Whereas a CEO is a little bit more fire or aim, fire, or ready, aim, fire. And if I got those, I may have messed up that whole thing because I'm an entrepreneur and I lose track of it. But that's the difference. It's like the entrepreneurs are creating, and in a way, the CEOs are scaling, if that makes sense. Like I think an entrepreneur can go so far before they have to put the process in their business that's going to help it get to the next level. And there's multiple processes you need to put in place. But the CEO is really good at that.
I love that. Entrepreneurs create, CEOs scale. And obviously, you've built a lot of your methodologies around helping those CEOs to scale. So what does that look like?
Yeah. You know what? That's interesting you say that because we're all in a way, like I'm using the word CEO because you're running a business, but what if you're a manager running a department? You're sort of in a way the CEO of that department. And the 6 functions that I'm going to talk about apply up and down the organization at every level of a manager. There's a few more things a CEO needs to be thinking about, but there's 6. And I like to call them, they're the 6 fundamental things that we as managers and leaders need to get right, okay, at any level. And the first one I want to talk about is called leading. And as we talk through these, I want to try to give like maybe a little tip on each one of them, something easy that we can kind of implement right away. So, leading as a manager, we all have to have the ability to lead other people, which means we have to be able to inspire them. Okay, we have to be able to inspire them around a vision. But the tactical piece of leading is really about coaching your people. And it's really about making sure that you're not giving them the answers, but as they're going through their work, you're spending some time helping coach them to the next level. And it doesn't have to be some difficult process. It's very easy to sit down every 2 weeks, 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever your cadence is with your direct reports, and just have a simple agenda. Like, hey, what's working? First of all, I'd probably start with get a little common ground. How are you doing? A little, good communication, make sure they're okay, doing well, so on and so forth. But then say, what's working? Okay, talk about it. So that's a time to celebrate. What's not working? Where are you challenged? Talk a little bit about where their challenges are. Ask them some questions so that they can help discover the answers. And then simply review the action steps that they said they were going to take last time and set new action steps. So it's pretty simple. After you get cordial with them, what's working and not working, step one. Step two, brainstorm, maybe do some solutions, you create some solutions around where they're stuck, and then review their past action steps and set new action steps. That's it. And then you leave them with that. Generally, I'll ask them what their key takeaways, but that's all it takes. And generally, your direct report should own that agenda. They should come in prepared. You as the manager, if you have a bunch of direct reports, you shouldn't have to prepare that agenda. It's a meeting. They come in, they're prepared to have the conversation, and you're listening and asking questions because it's really about them.
Yeah, we always say it's your time. You need to own it.
That's perfect. You say that about coaching, about those situations?
Yeah, whenever it comes to one-to-ones, we always say this is your time. You need to own it. Yeah.
I've never heard someone say that. That is brilliant. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right. Now, that's at the manager level. Okay, if there's a CEO listening to this podcast, when you get to the CEO level, from a leadership perspective, you own vision. You own where is this organization going? And it's your job to keep that in front of the organization constantly. So that's the little bit of the elevation from when you go from manager to CEO. So that's kind of, when we talk about leading, that's what we talk about. The next one after leading would be communication. Remember, we're talking about the 6 things all managers need to get right. The second one is communication. And when I talk about communication, I mean communicating for clarity. Do you have a way to get your point across in a conversation? And the simplest tool, well, first of all, we all know how this works. You have a conversation with somebody and you walk away, you come back and talk about it a week later, and they're like, so how'd that go? And they're like, they give you an answer like, well, that's not what I meant, because we didn't have clarity. And there's one way to get clarity. I call it the communication loop. We call it the communication loop. Whenever I'm in first of all, you have to plan for a conversation. What's the goal of the conversation that you're about? Any interaction going into, in our heads, we should be thinking, what's the goal of this? So that I don't waste their time and my time. What are we trying to do here? Sometimes it's very cordial. It's just you're hang out. But if you're having a conversation with somebody, or even if you're running a meeting or giving a speech, what's the goal? And so when I'm in conversations, even casually over a lunch, if we're talking about something and I express a concern or an opportunity or something that needs to get done, I'll ask them, can you play that back for me? And sometimes, which is even more powerful, they're telling me something and I'm like, let me see if I got this right. Let me play this back for you. And then they're like, yeah, that's what I meant. Or they'll be like, no, that's not what I meant. This is especially good when you're like, I don't want to say debating, but negotiating things, like to be able to, rather than it become defensive, you're playing back exactly to make sure that everybody's clear on what's happening.
Yeah, I have an executive coach that I use for my own, journey with leadership. And whenever she's talking to me, she always says to me, so what I'm understanding is, and she'll repeat it back. So yeah, that tracks for sure.
Well, it's like, listen, who does that? If you go see a therapist, that's all they do is ask you questions and play it back. But guess what? As managers, there's a little bit of that goes into this. You can kind of take it from their playbook. Ask questions, listen, play back, ask for understanding. It's critical. That changes everything. And it takes conversations and meetings and shrinks them. So that's my little tip on communication.
So the repeating back is sort of what's creating what you're calling the communication loop.
Exactly.
Got it.
Asking for them to play it back or you playing back what they're saying.
Got it.
And sometimes you'll shock people. They'll be like telling you something. You're like, let me play this back and make sure I have this right. And they'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, you get, or you don't. So it saves a lot of time in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the second one. So we've got 6. The first thing every manager needs to get right is we have to be able to lead people. Okay. Second thing is we've got to be able to communicate for understanding and for clarity. The third thing that I like to talk about from a fundamental is it's around people. We call it staffing. All right. And there's two things I want to talk about as it relates to staffing. Number one, when you're hiring people or anybody you're managing, do they have a simple one-page job description, which I know Trainual has, all over our platform? But do they have a simple one-page document? And the most important part, in my opinion, of that one-page document that explains what they do is, what are the 2 or 3 things that we're going to measure your performance on? If that's all you had, you're way ahead of most people. But if your direct reports have clarity around the 2 or 3 things that you're going to measure them on a monthly basis to understand if they're being successful, we, and more importantly, they are winning. Because you got to remember, like, the way I look at it is this, athletes, like pro athletes, they want to win. They want to win. They want to know where the goal line is. They want to know how they win the game. They want to know how they personally win, but they also want coaching and development. They also want help to get there. Okay, so if you're going to hire the best, but more importantly, retain the best, you better make sure that they understand how they win, and you better help get them there. So to me, that's the first part of staffing. The second part of staffing, where I think a lot of us fall down, I know I did, was once we spend the time to find the right person and we sell them on the vision and they walk in and they're just pumped to work there. Did you hit them with a plan for their first 90 days of everything that they're going to learn? Who's on their mentor team? What are their 90-day goals, 60-day goals, your 30, 60, and 90-day goals? And it doesn't have to be complicated, okay? You can always add on to it, but at least have something that they can see. It's like, okay, this is my 90-day roadmap. Here's the team around me. Here's my mentor team that's going to help me navigate the culture. Critical. And it can be simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can build it right in Trainual. I know that. So that's critical to have that onboarding plan.
The 30, 60, 90 is so impactful. This is my first year, ever hiring someone to be on a team. My first year, hiring in general. And when I was building the 30, 60, 90, I was really thinking, like, me as a high performer transitioning into a people leader, like, what would I want as a high performer to be successful? And it was really like 2 parts. For each of the 30, 60, 90 deliverables that I shared, it was like the why behind it. Here's why it's important. Here's how it impacts the business. Here are your resources around it. And then each of the points that they could hit. And within that first week, one of the things we charge people with is being able to put that 30, 60, 90 plan into Asana, or ClickUp or whatever project management tool you're using, right? And being able to build it out and just totally hit the ground running as soon as you start with, like, a clear idea of what you're going to be measured against and how you're going to get there. And just watching people flourish so early on. We always say, like, when a new hire starts, it feels like they've been there for several months, even when it's only been a couple of weeks. It's just like night and day difference.
Totally difference. And just think about how the faster they're up to speed, the faster the business is moving. But you said something, Mallory, that's so key. The why. And when I think about that, the more that people understand how their day-to-day work impacts the strategy and the vision of the company, oh my gosh, retention is going through the roof on something like that. And I remember back at Restaurants on the Run, we had 400 drivers in the field. Every one of them, we measured them each. Every one of them had 2 things we measured them on. But they all understood that how those measurements that we had, which for a driver delivering food, it was on time and accuracy. Did you get there on time, and was it accurate? Because we were feeding corporate America. Every driver knew how those 2 metrics layered into the vision of the business. And when you can get your frontline people understanding how what they're doing impacts the vision, a lot of things happen. Service goes up, but you also have the ability then to empower them more to make decisions on the front line because they get it. They're not just order takers. It's a little bit of a rant, and people don't get that sometimes. I'm glad you do. Should have known that.
All right. So you said leading, communication, staffing. Hit us with number 4.
Okay. Number 4 is planning. Okay. And so every manager needs to understand the importance of building a plan. So at the company level, you're going to build you're going to have a strategy, which, by the way, the CEO owns strategy. That's his job. He can't delegate it. He can talk to other people around him. Another podcast, we can talk about the essence of strategy and the 5 decisions and choices you need to make. That's separate, but the CEO owns that. Okay. But he has people that will help him. But what every manager owns is what's your plan in your department. What are your 3 to 5, what are your goals for your department? High level goals. What are your initiatives to help drive towards your goals? And then what are the action plans underneath those? And all of that layers up into what the company plan is. So if I'm in marketing, I may have a couple of high level goals. I'll have a few initiatives to support that. I'll have action items, and everything will have an owner and a date on that. And it's looked at on a regular basis. So that's the power of planning. Planning is a deep process. The thing that important, like at Trainual, I wear this t-shirt all the time. It says, trust the process. Sometimes I send little videos of Chris when I'm speaking. I'll be speaking somewhere and I'll have trust the process, and I'll send it to him and I'll be like, bro, check it out. I'm speaking today. And, but it is. Planning is a process. It's not an event. And so the point of planning at every level of the organization is it gives you structure moving forward, but most importantly, it gives you the ability to adjust and take advantage of new opportunities that come in, because you can look at a plan and say, this is what we're doing. Holy mackerel, look at this opportunity we have today. What are we going to trade off? Versus just saying, oh, let's go get that and forget about everything else. We can make conscious decisions about the moves we're going to make, because we are learning every month that we're executing against that plan.
Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot here for a second.
Uh-oh.
So you're a visionary. You've shared this with me. You're very passionate about the vision. It's why you became a CEO. And in my experience as an operator, it is very hard to get the visionary people to document a plan and to stick to a plan. So talk to us a little bit about that real quick.
2 things. Number 1, you have to have somebody facilitate your planning process. Don't have a visionary, or don't have the CEO. I did it last year at my company map. It was a disaster. Okay. Last year, 2020. This year, we brought in, which is silly. Why wouldn't I have a facilitator? That's what I've always done for 20 years. Brought a facilitator in. They ran the planning process for us, and it was way better. So that's the first thing. Second thing, which I'm going to talk about a little later, you have to have a cadence of reviewing that plan. And if that same coach that ran your planning session is helping you review the plan, you're winning. Because reviewing the plan, like, you can build a plan. The plan is whatever. It's the review of the plan that's most important, to say, are we on track? Are we off track? Hope that answers your question.
Yes, I love it. It does. Okay, so let's talk about number 5 then.
Number 5. One more thing on number 4, planning. If most plans are stuck on the shelf and nobody reviews them, so that's why it's important to be pulling it out on a regular cadence. Okay, number 5 is called organizing. So organizing resources. At a very high level for the CEO, if you're the CEO of the company, you've got to make sure you've got the right structure in your company. Like, what does the org chart look like? Okay. And by the way, do we have all the seats filled? Do we have names that are in multiple spots where it's like, wait, we have the same person on 3 important boxes? So it's important to understand where your organization is right now, but equally important is, where are you going? And so you can map that out and say, when are we going to get to this level? So that at the high level. When I get into simple tools for organizing, there's one big tool, because when you're organizing resources, what do you have? You have time, you have money, you have people. Okay. So money, obviously, you build a budget. Okay. Everybody talks about time management. Everybody's got their own system of managing time. The simplest thing is they always say, hey, look at your time for a week or 2 weeks. Coordinated, color coordinated, whatever you have to do. Like if I showed you my calendar, it's color coordinated. I'm neurotic.
I could probably take it a step further with you in that department, because I actually am anti-time management. I am pro-energy management, but that's a whole nother bear.
Okay, that's good. But, maybe that should be in this, like, maybe it should be, energy should be the 4th one under here. So some people say, look at your time, where are you putting it? And I just blah, blah, blah. There's all types of systems for that. I'm not going to get into that. The important thing that I want to talk about in organizing is delegation, because that's, as a manager, that's how you're going to manage your time and help get things done through people because people are one of the resources. So a lot of times people will delegate or say something to somebody that needs to get done, but they're never really clear on it. They don't put a date on it of when it needs to be completed. They don't talk about the resources needed to complete it. And most importantly, you know what they don't do? They don't do the thing we just talked about. They don't follow up. So delegating is critical for managers. You know, your first step is you got to pick the right person. All right. Then you got to clearly communicate what you're delegating, which gets back to that communication loop, making sure they understand it, have them play it back for you. You've got to put a date on it. And then we got to do what we just talked about in planning. You got to follow up at a certain time, a designated time. We're going to follow up and see how things are moving along. That's why when I said earlier in the planning process, when you asked, how do you make sure it happens? When you set that regular, you know, when you build a plan with dates and names, then we have that regular cadence of follow-up. It's all built in. You're delegating and you're following up. That's the beautiful thing, Mallory, is that's why I'm so glad we're talking about the 6 functions, because once you start to understand them and you start to leverage them all, they start to reinforce each other. And it's like 1 + 1 = 3. So that's the tool I want to talk about as it relates to organizing, making sure we're delegating properly. But so tell me more about your energy management, though. I mean, I can't let that go.
Yeah. So there's this theory that, you could have all the time in the world, but you still wouldn't have the energy or passion to invest across that time. And so it's, instead of thinking about your life in sort of time blocks, you should be really thinking about it in terms of like energy bursts, right? Like I'm most productive in the morning, and this is where I'm going to put all of these things when I'm high energy, and I'm a little low energy when I'm here. So I'm going to put these things here, and just realizing that you have like sort of, highs and lows in terms of your energy and your ability to, or I guess I should say like your capacity for things.
Yeah.
And so it's really not time that you should be managing, but it's like your energy and learning how to use activation energy, right? So like doing something small that, maybe you're putting off doing a project because you're like, man, that thing's a beast. And I really want to do the map workshop, but 2.5 days is a really long time. And I just, I'm struggling with it. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to dive in and do one course. And it's like, if you can convince yourself to do that one course, now you're locked in. You're like, oh man, this is really fun. I'm having a good time. And you can keep kind of going.
Yeah.
So thinking about things in terms of activation energy and energy management versus time management is like the most simple way that I can put it, but there's a whole big thing to it.
Well, first of all, I love this because you're right. Like they kind of go hand in hand. It's like if you're working in your least effective time, you're not going to get the right. If you have less energy, you're not going to get as much done. Okay, let me ask you this: when is your energy time? Is it morning, afternoon, evening? When is it?
Yeah. So I feel like I'm sort of unique in this way because I can get up at 6 a.m. and I can do a jujitsu class, and in the morning I am so prime for working out, for doing martial arts, that kind of stuff. But in terms of working, I'm the polar opposite. So my highest energy peaks are going to be at night when the world sort of gets quiet, the sounds get a lot quieter, and I can just like laser focus in my dark office at night. So I'm not, I can't just really put myself in like this early bird or night owl box because it really just depends on what the activity is, which is why energy management is such a thing for me.
Okay, I gotta follow because I'm like you. I'm ADHD. I get up early, and I love to hit email for like 20 minutes in the morning, and then I like to work out. But I don't have once it gets dark at night, I'm like, that's it, and I can't relax. But I'm like, I'm not working at like 8 o'clock at night sometimes, but I'm morning. Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we went down that little rabbit hole because we're talking about organizing, which is about managing resources. And you're teaching me about the power of managing energy. So I love that. So that's the fifth one. So what have we covered? Talked about 6 things that we have to get right as managers: leading, communicating, staffing, planning, organizing. And the last one I call controls. And another way to think about controls is, do we have measurements and accountability in our organization? So this is outside of leading, this is probably my favorite one. This is where I think people said, oh, he's like the metrics guy, blah, blah, blah. Backstory, not really the metric. I love measuring things, but like I knew that I needed help with accountability. That's why I brought a coach into our business, because we can measure things, but my abilities to performance manage and put a cadence around making sure things are on track, that was horrible. Like I was bad at follow-up. So I had to put a process in. This is the process for performance management. This is where we make sure that everyone in the organization, remember, we went back in the beginning and we said, hey, we have to make sure everybody understands how they're being measured. This section here, controls, is where you create accountability, where you measure performance and you take corrective action. And this is about everybody setting goals on a monthly basis. And it's funny because we talked about planning and how there was goals in there. This is how it all kind of comes together. You delegate, you make sure everybody understands what their job is. You make sure that everybody's setting goals every single month. And then you have that cadence of following up. So once a month, we get together and let's look at your last month's goals. How'd you do? What are your new goals? And the important thing here, this is the little tip I want to layer in for all managers listening. I know that holding people accountable is hard. It's not comfortable for most people. It wasn't for me, because I looked at it as like, oh boy, I got to punish them. That's not what it's about. It's about recognition and it's about corrective action. So when you're reviewing someone's goals, if they succeeded, it's like, hey, yeah, cool. That's awesome. Celebrate the win. If they missed it, you just simply ask them, what's your corrective action? That's it. You want to put accountability in? You ask them that. As soon as you take it and say, here's what I think you should do, you're giving away the accountability. You're like actually taking it on yourself. So when they win, celebrate. When they miss the goal, just say, what's your corrective action? And then follow up the next month. Now, I understand eventually if that's repeated, if they keep missing their goals, they're going to be on a performance, management plan, and you may eventually have to move them to another position or help them move on to something that they're going to be more successful at. But the key is always asking, what's your corrective action?
So you talked a little bit about accountability, and I know the Vital Factors accountability system is a super important piece of what you do. So how does that sort of play into this?
So if these are the 6 most important things that a manager has to do, we have to get right, then the Vital Factors accountability system is a framework that the managers can work within. So when this company was started, MAP was started 65 years ago, the founder would go into companies and just put the framework in, which is the accountability system, the Vital Factors system. And after doing that for a while and watching companies fail at executing, he stopped and he says, he took a look at everything that was going on and all the clients, and he realized that the companies were failing because of 6 things, and they're the 6 things we just spoke about. So he developed the curriculum and said, listen, it's one thing for me to put a framework in of accountability, but if the managers aren't great at managing, then it's all going to fall apart. So that's where we said, we're going to train you to be great managers and then put a framework around you to help reinforce everything you're doing. So what the Vital Factor MAP system is a system of accountability. It's simply making sure that at every level of the organization, or I should say every department, leadership team, and then each department, once a month, you're getting together with your team and you're having a simple meeting for a few hours. And it's that one time a month where everybody's together taking a top-down look at your department or the whole company if you're, the leadership team of the organization. And there's 5 steps in this meeting. Number 1, we look at it. What's working, what's not working. Let's celebrate successes, and where do we have issues right now? We call them vital issues. Second thing we do is we look at what we call the Vital Factor scoreboard, which is where it's those 10 to 15, some people call them KPIs, we call them vital factors, that are vital to your team's success. I know that there could be 50 of them. We want to look at the top 10 to 15 that are vital. And if we want to dig deeper, we'll dig deeper. But if we start with 50, we'll never finish the meeting. Okay? So what's working and not working? Let's look at the scoreboard. Let's look at some of those problems that we're finding as what's not working, or some numbers that are off, and let's problem solve those and create action in a very systematic approach. That's the 3rd step. The 4th step is we'll review the goals that you set last month, and we'll set new goals. And then the last step is, what's your key takeaway, where we document learnings. for the team. So very simple. And for 15 years, we did that at my previous company, Restaurants on the Run. And we did that there were probably 12 to 15 of those meetings happening every month. I had at the leadership level. Every one of the cities we were in had their own meeting. There was one in operations, one in finance, one in, sales, one in marketing. And we just kept doing that over and over again. And you just build momentum over time.
Do you feel like all of these need to be implemented together, or is there one that's maybe most important that you say, okay, I want you to focus on this one first and get this locked down?
Yeah. So you could start either way. You could either, the way we work with the way that I would do it is I would either start with, I'd either go to our workshop and learn everything first, and then I would implement the system, or you could go either way. You could start, we have a program now where we'll go into a company for 2 days and we will work with the entire executive team and work them through the 6 functions, and then launch the Vital Factor process on day 2, and then work with them every single month, put them on our technology to make it really easy. But if I had to pick one of these 6 to start with, I've never been asked that question. So here's where I'd start. I'd probably start on staffing, because that's about people. And, we're only as good. The performance capacity of any company is determined by the quality of their people. I'll say it again. The performance capacity of any company is determined by the quality of their people. If you don't have the right people, it's going to be very difficult to build a great company. So that's where I would start.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So, and for the managers, that's critical, because we're trying to hire the best and keep the best. And people sometimes miss that last part, which is keep the best.
I love it. And I totally resonate with what you're saying. But sort of bringing it home, right, in closing here, you've worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of leaders, building them up to be incredible. You've seen the work that they've done. You've had incredible results. And I'm curious, when you sort of envision some of the best leaders that you've worked with, how are they thinking and operating and showing up?
The best leaders that I've seen, they're in the business. They are understanding that business up and down. They're communicating with their team. They're not off running around and traveling and saying, hey, I'm the visionary. I can go do whatever I want. No, I hate to use the word grinding, but if you're trying to build a great company, you got to grind a little bit. You got to be in that business. You delegate and hold people accountable, but you have to understand that business up and down and lead by example and understand, not only the strategy, but what's happening in the ecosystem, because the team is looking to you to be the one that can kind of see around corners through the network and the people that you're associating with. So that leader's in the business. They're deep in the business. And I got to be honest with you, I personally made that mistake. There was a time where I was a little bit more aloof, because I was like, oh, we got a great team. We got a great process. But man, Mallory, all I can tell you is that companies need their CEO. They need to know they're there, and they need to know that they are in control.
They call that leading from the front, right?
I like to call it leading from the front, leading from where you stand. Yep.
Yeah. And I think too about, how Trainual approaches promotions to leadership positions, which is very different from anything I've experienced in my past life working in corporate America, where it's like, the person who sat in the seat the longest, or who's known the CEO the longest, or who has the best ability to rub elbows is always the one that gets promoted. And Trainual says, no, the best ICs are the ones who are going to get promoted to leadership positions, the ones who can build their area of the business and get it performing optimally, document their processes, train up their peers, build up the people around them enough to be able to pass that off and grow into something else. And then the next thing that they grow into, they're super hands-on with, and it's sort of a requirement of being promoted at Trainual, which is something that I admire so deeply.
You know what? I think that's great to hear. I love Trainual more every day. And what's interesting about what you said? It's different than micromanaging. Being hands-on is different than micromanaging. Hands-on is understanding the business and coaching and delegating properly, all the things that we spoke about. It's not micromanaging. It's the opposite. So who knew that talking about management would be so fun, Mallory?
I know, right? Well, it's because we're talking about it in the right ways, right?
Yeah.
The ways that lift people up. So thank you so much for joining us today, Michael.
It's great. Pleasure.
Tell folks where they can follow you, follow along with your story and all your words of wisdom.
Well, LinkedIn is where I post most of my content. So I have stuff coming out pretty regularly, like 2-3 times a week. That's the best place. Michael Caito, Caito, CEO of MAP Consulting. We also have our website, mapconsulting.com. And of course, you can reach me through LinkedIn. You can email me at, my email is mc@mapconsulting.com. I love talking to entrepreneurs and managers, whatever I can do.
Love it. Well, be sure to click the link in our show notes for a made-for-you guide that highlights all the best practices shared today so that you can take action and level up. Plus, I'll be working with the MAP team on some super cool templates, so be able to check those out in Trainual. As always, document your processes and be a good human. We will catch you next time.